Hi everyone, it's Nicole here, and today I have a card share featuring Pretty Pink Posh dies and sequins, as well as Winnie and Walter Stamps. For my card today, I created a shaker card, and I combined the Stitched Duo 2 Pretty Pink Posh die with the large stitched rectangle from the Lawn Fawn stamp set. I needed both of them, so I like to use the large one. It kind of helps make the exact size of the card of an A2 card front. To begin my card, I am using Distress inks as watercolors, and I have stamped and embossed some of the florals from the Winnie and Walter, the Big Bold Extras stamp set, and I'm simply using a little bit of water to wet these and then color in the images. The embossing kind of helps hold the watercolor right there in that area so that it doesn't wick out. I'm using spiced marmalade and scattered straw, as well as crushed olive and forest moss inks. I have both leaves and the flowers, and I'm simply pressing my ink pad onto my Ranger craft mat, pulling a little water or adding a little water with my paintbrush to the ink, and then coloring in the images. And you can go back and maybe add a couple of different shades of color to each image if you want to. I did combine the greens a little bit on some of the leaves. Some of them I left more one solid color. It just depended. I wanted a variety. I'm going to go ahead and color in several of these flowers. I want to have a nice little border of flowers along the bottom of my shaker frame. And I am coloring in a red flower here, but I ended up not liking that for the design. It didn't really work, so I did color in an additional orange flower after I did these initial first flowers. You know, sometimes the first idea you have might not be it might not work out, and that's okay. That's the great thing I think about stamping, is you aren't obligated to use just the supplies there, like if it was a sticker sheet and you only had those options. It's a stamp, and you can stamp it as many times as you need to get exactly what you want. Now here's an example of pulling in a little bit of that spiced marmalade into the scattered straw, and then I'm pulling in a little bit of the barn door into the spiced marmalade flowers. It gives a little bit more of a two-tone type floral look to some of the flowers and keeps to that watercolor theme. It's very imperfect, and I like it that way. Now I let all of these air dry. I really felt like you can heat them up with a heat tool if you need to, but I much prefer the look of watercolor when it air dries. Once those had air dried, I did fussy cut all of those images out. It wasn't really too big of a deal. They cut out really easily. The embossing helps with that a lot. I'm using my Distress inks now to add the flower centers, also from that Big Bold Extras stamp set from Winnie and Walter. This is another step that you want to make sure that watercolor is completely dry so that the center portion doesn't wick out and you won't be able to tell what it is if it's still wet. Now I'm ready to make my frame, and I am using that large stitched rectangle from Lawn Fawn and the Stitched Duo 2 die from Pretty Pink Posh. I love how they work perfectly together, and one of the things I love when I make shaker cards is making sure all of my pieces are uniform in size. So that's where that large stitched rectangle really comes into play. I could have cut a piece of cardstock to 5.5 by 4.25 inches. However, there's room for error there. With the die, it's going to cut exactly the size you need. So I have my frame, and then using that large stitched rectangle, I have die cut a piece of vellum. This is going to be my window. A lot of times I use acetate to create my windows for my shaker cards, and I really wanted to soften the window for this card, plus I wanted to stamp and emboss on it, and you really can't do that on acetate without melting it. So I'm using vellum, and it works nicely for this card. Now that insert piece from my frame I am going to use because it has that great stitched detail, and even though you can't see through the vellum quite as well as you could acetate and really see that detail, I like the finished look of that when you get really close. So I did go ahead and just place that on my card base. Now for the vellum, I am going to take a powder tool and rub it all over the vellum. I'm using a lot of stamped greetings here, and I want the embossing powder to only stick to my stamped greetings and not kind of leave speckles everywhere. I think it's important when your greetings are big and bold that they really are crisp and clear and easy to read. I'm going to start with my largest script greeting. This is from the Big Bold and Blessings stamp set from Winnie and Walter. I'm going to ink it up with Versamark ink, and I have that frame over there because that does help me line it up and make sure I get that perfectly centered, even though I haven't attached it yet. And I needed to lay out a couple of my flowers again just to make sure before I press that down. And then I'll go ahead and stamp the word Blessings, and I'm going to use some Simon Says Stamp gold embossing powder, and I'll shake the rest of that right back into my jar. Tap that off. Now for the rest of my greetings, I'm going to use white embossing powder. And I've already assembled several words, in fact 4 of them, from one of the Big, the Bold, and U, I believe, or the Big Bold U stamp set, to make the phrase from me to you. And I'm going to stamp that below the word Blessings and add white embossing powder. And above the word Blessings, I'm going to use the word Heartfelt, which is from the Blessings stamp set. So I love that their stamp sets coordinate. You can mix and match, create all kinds of sayings, whatever you want to say, and it makes it really easy to customize your greetings. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to line this up. Now I need to make sure I emboss those images before I stamp because it's going to overlap, and it wouldn't look good if I did it before I embossed the word Blessings. So I did emboss that, stamped the word Heartfelt, tapped that off, and then I'll emboss the word Heartfelt. And then I can put together my shaker. This was really quick and easy once I did my watercolor flowers and did my stamping. The rest of it came together. So I added some adhesive to the back of my frame. I didn't quite get that lined up, and because it was vellum, I was able to pull it off. I was a little bit afraid I might have ruined my frame, but it came right off for some reason this time. Now on the back of my frame, I have plenty of room. It's a big, bold, thick frame. So I can use my Scotch foam adhesive and create my shaker. This is where I'm going to put the sequins so that they don't fall out. So you want the foam adhesive to butt up right next to each other. And one thing I have found with this particular adhesive, it is very thin. The profile is not high, so I like to double it up so my shakers or my sequins or beads or whatever you want to put inside the shaker has room to actually shake. If you don't do this, it pretty much stays put and does not move at all. So there is what my frame looks like. Now before I remove that backing paper from the foam adhesive or add my sequins for the shaker, I'm going to go ahead and attach my florals along the bottom border of this shaker card. I'm using glue dots to attach all these watercolor florals, and I just love these colors together. I think the orange, red, yellow combo is really pretty and perfect for fall. I'm tucking some of the flowers underneath the frame border there on the front. I like the look of grounding my images this way. I'm tucking the leaves underneath some of the florals, using some smaller glue dots for the smaller pieces. And I'm going to just build this frame all the way across the bottom edge of my shaker. And mix and match the leaves. I was really glad when I got to this part that I had so many different colors of leaves and that they weren't all exactly the same. I thought it looked a lot prettier with the different variations of green leaves. And then I'll finish off with that last orange flower. Now I have some sequins here. These are all from Pretty Pink Posh. I'm using some Zots bling glue dots to attach all of these to the front of my card. Even though the shaker portion is going to be filled with sequins, I thought it would be nice to have a few on the front. It kind of helps embellish and soften somewhat the outside of the card and really adds a ton of interest. This is a lot of white on a card, which I love the look of, and I think those few sequins really kind of help brighten up that white portion of the card. Now this is some gold confetti. This is the 6mm confetti, and my bag had a hole in it, so more dumped out than I actually wanted or needed. So I'm just going to scoop some of that up to the side. I'm using the 4mm sparkling clear and then the 4mm metallic gold inside my shaker. I'll remove that backing paper, place my card base to the foam adhesive, and there is my shaker card. I hope you've enjoyed this video showcasing the Winnie and Walter stamps used with Pretty Pink Posh dies and sequins. The supplies I've used are listed and linked below the video on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.